With MAGA, the cruelty is always the point. They want to inflict as much pain as possible on the people they view as their political enemies. But it's not just their political enemies. Anyone who is not a billionaire or who is not kissing up to Donald Trump, they do not care about. They will strip you of the most important social services that keep you fed, housed, and alive. They will go after the rule of law so that no one can criticize Donald Trump, and they will rip away all the fundamental freedoms of this country, including due process, which we see very clearly in Donald Trump's illegal and immoral mass deportation plan, which was just hit with a lawsuit that has Karoline Leavitt melting down and losing her mind in one of the grossest reactions that I have seen from her in a long, long time. And before we get into that, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video. If you haven't already and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way, and it really does mean a lot to me. Now, before we get into the reaction from Leavitt to this lawsuit, first, I want some context on this situation and some much-needed emotion from Jamie Raskin right here.
Judge Jeb Boasberg, the chief judge of the District Court of the District of Columbia, who enjoined the mass roundup and deportation of immigrants to an infamous El Salvadoran prison in peacetime without any due process at all, allegedly under the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, a statute explicitly limited to wartime and military invasion. Some of our colleagues have been railing against Judge Boasberg for ordering the planes to be turned around. They say those planes were filled with terrorists, I think my good friend from Texas said. Well, here's one person of many who wasn't a terrorist on that flight or a gangbanger. His name's Kilmer Garcia. He's a Marylander married to a U.S. citizen who has a 5-year-old son with autism. And he went to pick up his son, but he was picked up first by ICE. And then he was shackled and put on that airplane and shipped off to the torturers of El Salvador without ever having the benefit of those two most beautiful words in the English language, due process. He never saw a judge. Nobody ever told him what he was being charged for. Nobody ever told him that there were any charges against him. And he was sent to a mega prison run by the self-proclaimed dictator of El Salvador. And yesterday, you know what happened, Mr. Chairman? The Trump administration admitted that it had made a mistake. He was not actually a gangbanger. He was not a criminal. It was all a mistake. If there'd been due process, maybe that would have been determined, but there wasn't. But they put him on that plane and he's El Salvador. Well, all's well that ends well, right? No. The administration says there's nothing they can do about it now because he's no longer in U.S. custody. This guy who lives in my state, married to a U.S. citizen with citizen children, he's stuck with the dictator of El Salvador. Well, Judge Boasberg, some of our colleagues want to impeach him. Look, some of our colleagues, they've got "for wanted" signs in the Cannon House office building with the names and faces of judges on them. They want to impeach them now. They want to impeach Judge Boasberg. Some of my colleagues should be alerted to this fact. Judge Boasberg was first named to the bench by President Bush.
They ripped a man out of his home, a father, and deported him to one of the most terrifying prisons in the world. And they don't care. They don't care that they made a mistake. They don't care that they admitted to that mistake. They are just going to keep on rolling because they think they can. They think they are accountable to no one. But that is not true. There are still courts to check Donald Trump, and that is exactly what happened. So before we get to Leavitt's reaction, first, we have to get that context. Judge orders return of Maryland man mistakenly deported to El Salvador. A federal judge ruled Friday that a Maryland father who was mistakenly deported to a prison in El Salvador must be returned to the U.S. by Monday, April 7th. Kilmer Abrego Garcia was deported to a supermax prison on March 15th despite a protection order granted in 2019 that should have kept him from being sent to El Salvador. He filed a lawsuit against several federal officials demanding to be returned to the U.S. Thank you to everyone that has helped us and supported us in fighting this, Abrego Garcia's wife, Jennifer, told a crowd outside the courthouse following the ruling. A statement from the advocacy organization CASA said, "We will continue to fight this. The first thing I am going to do when I see him is give him a big hug." A court has ruled Donald Trump deported a man illegally, immorally. He must be returned. But what do you think the reaction from the Trump administration was? What do you think the reaction from Karoline Leavitt was? Well, it's probably as bad as you can expect, as we unfortunately see right here. Trump administration mocks judge's order to bring back Maryland father from Salvadoran prison, even after admitting he was deported in error. White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt mocked a judicial ruling on Friday that ordered the Trump administration to facilitate the return of a man it deported. A U.S. district judge ordered the administration to obtain the release of Kilmar Abrego Garcia from the notorious CECOT prison in El Salvador and bring him back to the U.S. Abrego Garcia is a Salvadoran national who was arrested in Baltimore on March 12th after leaving his job as a sheet metal worker to pick up his 5-year-old son. The government has alleged that Abrego Garcia belongs to the MS-13 gang, but in a court filing on Monday, lawyers for U.S. Immigration Customs Enforcement said Abrego was deported due to an administrative error. Abrego Garcia was one of more than 216 foreign nationals arrested in the U.S. and deported to El Salvador for imprisonment. Most of those deported were Venezuelans who have no apparent connection to the Central American country. None of the people apprehended appear to have been given due process. The record reflects that Abrego Garcia was apprehended in Maryland without legal basis, and without further process or legal justification was removed to El Salvador. His lawyer wrote in her order after describing the deportation as an illegal act. In response, Leavitt slammed the ruling and denied the judge had any legal basis for issuing it. We are unaware of the judge having jurisdiction or authority over the country of El Salvador, Leavitt said in a statement. White House advisor Stephen Miller mocked the judge on X, stating that she thinks she's the president of El Salvador. The White House's response suggests that the administration is of the view that once a deportee is out of the U.S., the judiciary lacks the authority to order their return, including those the administration itself said were mistakenly deported. It is unclear if the administration believes the U.S. citizens it deports would also not be subject to U.S. judicial oversight. Donald Trump and Karoline Leavitt are essentially saying, oopsies, we screwed up, we don't care, moving on. She was joking that a judge thinks that they're in charge of El Salvador. Oh, so funny. A judge wants to see a man, a lawful permanent resident of the United States who has the same rights as a citizen to have due process under the law. She thinks it's funny. She should mock that judge believes this person should be treated like a person. A disgusting human being. Karoline Leavitt is disgusting. The cruelty is always the point with MAGA. That is what they are going after. And what's so sad and despicable about all of this is that this big showy act from Donald Trump, from Karoline Leavitt, from Stephen Miller is because their mass deportation plan, we talked about this in its first month, was not getting the numbers that it wanted. So instead, they thought, we can't make a big show with our numbers. Let's go straight to human rights violations. The cruelty is always, always the point. And also the distraction is the point, because clearly there is a lot going wrong with this Trump administration that Karoline Leavitt wants to distract from. Just take a look at her tweet right here. Great news. The economy is starting to roar with a strong 228,000 jobs added in the month of March, well ahead of the market's expectation. There was also a sharp increase in transportation, construction, and warehousing employment. The president's push to onshore jobs here in the United States is working. The golden age of America is on its way. The golden age of America, she says, as the Dow tumbles, as recession indicators pop up. Congrats on the great March. If Biden got those jobs numbers, by the way, Fox News would be crucifying him. Let's make that clear. Let's actually, instead of thinking about the past, what's the updated state of play for Caroline's sake? Let's go to Ari Melber for that.
95 years, and we can show you the top 500 companies. These are the largest companies that trade, and whether you trade in the stock market or not, as I've told you, this will affect you because these type of losses come with consequences and eventually job cuts. And of course, the price and inflation issues. This is down another 6% today. Another market index you heard of, the Dow, shed over 5%. The NASDAQ, another big bucket of stocks, losing just about 6%. This is what they call an official bear market, where you are down a fifth from the peak. Trillions gone. The Fed now warning Trump's tariffs will juice inflation. Remember, that was the big issue, the high prices that helped him over the understandable concern with inflation and the way people blamed then President Biden. Well, Donald Trump's serving up more inflation. That's according to the Fed, which is the independent arm of monetary policy for the federal government, and, of course, the risk of recession or slower growth. One of the top banks, J.P. Morgan, says we have tipped over to a recession now being more likely than not, 60%. That is, based on all the modules they have, it is more likely than not that Trump's choice to do these tariffs will give us a recession that otherwise was less likely. Indeed, before Trump came into office, though, same banks were putting the recession fears much lower, like 20%. The Financial Times, which is sort of the British version of the Wall Street Journal as a Bible for the market, says this is an astonishing act of self-harm by Donald Trump. Then their counterpart that I mentioned in the U.S., Rupert Murdoch's Wall Street Journal, quote, someone should sue to block his abuse of power. The Journal, now suddenly concerned about Trump lawlessness, something they have often minimized on other topics. China is hitting back, and boy, do they have the resources and the runway to do it. They're matching the whopping 30% tariff. Economics can be complicated, but this part is simple. I will tell you, America, if I can speak directly with you, you will be paying that tariff. That's exactly how it works, which is exactly why so many people, apart from our divided political times and partisan lenses, so many people, from nonpartisan experts to liberals who warned against this, to Republicans who privately warned against this, although they didn't use any power to try to stop Trump, to Wall Street experts, to, of course, economists explain, yeah, a third, 34% spike, and you're going to pay it, because that's what Donald Trump decided for you. Welcome to Donald Trump's America and his economics.
So you're crashing the economy? So it's not a golden age. President's not bringing jobs back. People are going to lose them en masse. I'm sorry. I think Karoline Leavitt is a horrible, despicable person. And that is my take on all of this. That's where we're going to leave this, because if I talk any longer, I will say some things that will probably get this video taken off of YouTube. The cruelty is always the point with MAGA. It's sad, it's grotesque, and it has to be called out. We're always going to be doing that on this show. And if you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video, and if you stuck around to the end, you can drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I will see you soon.